Greetings and salutations. This is Rabbi David Orlofsky. I'm opening the show a little differently than I usually do because I just was looking for a particular episode and I was just watching every 4 or 5 episodes in a row, and every single time with the exact same cadence I say, "Hi, this is David Orlofsky and welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show." And I was like, oh my gosh, how do I say the same thing every single week? So I'm going to try to mix it up a little bit just to confuse people. Don't want you to get too comfortable. Yeah. And this is the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. In coming to the end of its 6th year, good Lord, who would guess that I had so much stuff to say? It's really great because I sit at my Shabbos table, nobody talks to me. So that's all right because I got all of you out there who want to hear what I have to say. And, thank you so much, everybody. I just got an email from a Rav who works in kashrus, and he says I have to drive long distances to different factories, and I listen to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show, and it makes the ride that much easier and more meaningful. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody who allowed me to be a part of your life. I cannot put into words what it means that people are allowing me to share anything that I have to say, and the fact that anyone gets chizuk or meaning from it, even if you just get annoyed and then you write angry emails because I get another episode out of that. That alone is worthwhile. And if you're watching with our friends over, you say this part of the line I need, right? If you're watching with our friends over at Eternity Time, wherever you watch or listen to your podcast, it's so nice that you're here with us. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. How about that? And we have a sponsor this episode, sponsored by Lillian and Sandy Shapiro, Le'iloi Nishmas, our parents, Yeshiva ben Yosef, Yehuda, Shieindel bas Yisrael, Yooel, Chaim, Dovid ben Ytzchak, Aייזיק, Mלכה bas Shmuel Zev. This is, of course, what we call on the Rabbi Orlofsky Show, Bubby and Grandpa Shapiro from Stamford, Connecticut, because as you know, we've mentioned before, a good friend of the show is, of course, Yitzhak Shapiro. This is his parents. And, of course, a producer, Israel. This is his grandparents-in-law. So, the Shapiros are an essential part of the show. And, of course, I always refer to him as Chazan Shapiro because he was Chazan in Stamford. And when he comes, I have my own little shul here in Har Nof. And in our little village of Har Nof, we have our own little shul, the Rabbi Orlofsky Show shul. And sometimes we have the schus of having him daven there, and it's just delightful. So thank you so much, Bubby and Grandpa. And it should be a schus for the Alta Bub and the Alta Zaydas, and of whom I've heard many stories over the years from the extended Shapiro clan. So it should be a neschus. All of the Torah that we're doing should be an aliyah for the neshamas. Okay, we are in a series. We had part 1 last time, and this is going to be part 3. I'm skipping part 2. I just wanted to throw people off. I'm just kidding. Of course, this is part 2. When I was learning here in Eretz Yisrael, so we would make an effort to write home, and it was essentially worthless because it took 2 weeks for my parents to get the aerogram. I wasn't going to invest in an actual stamp. My gosh, I was on a very limited budget. So they used to have these pieces of tissue paper called aerograms, and you would write on them, and then you would fold them over. They had really nebuch glue on the side that you could glue it shut, and it had a little stamp. Well, they were pretty cheap, and you just send them off. And sometimes you would just write a series of 4 or 5, And a friend of mine every now and then would just leave out one of the numbers. So he would number them 1, 2, 4, and 5. And 4 would start. So now that I'm out of the hospital, Baruch Hashem, my Lord is going much And they're searching for aerogram number 3. So yeah, that's why I was going to do episode number 3. But this is really episode number 2. Don't want to confuse anybody. Yeah. We have all kinds of people who watch the Rabbi Orlofsky show. Most of my audience is obviously the sharpest knife in the drawer, as the expression goes. But not everybody. And we try to be shovel at call. We want to try to give a product that everybody can have. And although it is surprising, there are people who watch the show who are humor impaired, which is an actual disability. Dave Barry, who is a humorist with the Miami Herald, wrote a whole, thing about people who are humor impaired, where they just don't know that a joke took place. And I have that problem very often where I start to say something and people are like, is he joking? Is he serious? Does he really mean it? But because of that, it allows me to get away with things that other people can't get away with, because you always have the option of saying he was just joking. In any event, so I haven't said that in a very long time. But once upon a time, one of my phrases I used to use all the time was "in any event." I know that because someone impersonated me once and kept saying "in any event." Yeah. I don't think I've said it that often. Could be I have. I don't know. I've been moving to develop new catchphrases. You have to always bend with the times. So in any event, we're talking about how to choose a yeshiva. So last time we talked about the idea of being clear that you want to learn yeshiva, right? We talked about seminaries. Seminaries for girls to learn Torah is an option. There are those who would maintain that Bizman Hazeh, it is essential, because girls have to be able to learn Torah on a deeper level so that it will be on par with the secular studies that they have, and so that it won't be less serious in their eyes than other things. So there are definitely those who will argue that's a necessity. Most of those people are people who run seminaries. But it's an issue of whether or not it's a luxury or a necessity, and you can definitely hear the argument. Rav Pelkovitz Zassal, who was the Rav of the White Shul in Far Rockaway, we had a Shabbaton there, a summer regional Shabbaton at Long Island, NCSY, when I was there. And he said something that made a deep impression on me. The Parsha says that, their clothing didn't wear out. And he brought a medrash that says that, we all know the nace, that the Anani Kavod would clean and press their clothing, and it also, the clothing would grow along with them. And he brought a medrash that said not all their clothing, only the clothing that they wore. And if they had clothing when they came out of Mitzrayim and they were 8 years old, and they were 8-year-old clothing, and it sat in a box, 40 years later, they were still 8-year-old clothing. The only ones that grow are the ones that you wear. And he said the same thing is true about your Torah. If you keep the Torah with you and it's growing with you, then it continues to grow. But I used to tell this to people who would go to afternoon Hebrew school. I said, if your Jewish education goes up to the age of 12, or 13, you'll be wearing your bar mitzvah suit for the rest of your life. And when you start to become an adult, it gets very uncomfortable. And there are people who come to Israel, and I've noticed this, particularly girls in seminary, they take notes, furiously take notes, notebook and notebooks full of notes. And they go on the shelf, and most people never look at them again. And you could say to somebody, how was your year of Israel? I said, look, it's over there. That's where it is. It's on the shelf. As opposed to being with me all the time. I've had girls from seminary who told me that they would chaza over my notes from Mesilas Yesharim or parsha, and they would go over them every year to be able to keep it fresh and to incorporate it. That's the ideal. So obviously, according to that, you need to be able to keep the Torah growing with you so that you go to university and you study Aristotle and Plato and Socrates, and you say, wow, we tried to kill these people so we could play with a dreidel and eat latkes. Yeah. If that's as far as it goes, you understand your Jewish education is not going to be enough to insulate you against the forces of the world. So that's the logic of it. But a boy is a mitzvah Talmud Torah. So that's first, is that you have to get that clear. Okay. The next thing we want to deal with is, and I'm not talking now about the derech halimud. We'll talk about the derech halimud afterwards, and that is the hashkafa, which means you obviously want a yeshiva that's going to incorporate your belief system. You don't want to go to a yeshiva where you're at odds with the hashkafa, with the philosophy of the school. I'll explain to you what I mean by this. When I was working for a particular yeshiva and I was recruiting, and November time, the skies across the United States are filled with Rosh Yeshiva who are running around recruiting boys for the coming year in November, because the boys who are already in yeshiva already have their money, so we need to go and get more people. So November is a very hot time and people are flying around. And I was just starting to recruit for this yeshiva. And another Rosh Yeshiva there said, kid, let me give you a piece of advice. Whatever you do, don't tell them they're going to change. Nobody hears that they're going to change. Tell them, yeah, they'll come back just the way that they left. So it was interesting. There was one particular yeshiva where it was an alumni who was recruiting, and he had a standard line he would say. He'd say, at the end of the year, the yeshiva said to me, what did you gain? And I said, well, I gained an insight into Torah, I gained insight into Hashem. He goes, no, you learned the importance of time, of how to be able to use your time. I said, a whole little speech like this. Okay, we don't go to yeshiva to learn the importance of time. But the idea being that you try to talk around the topic so that you don't frighten people. Now, I understand this concept. I ran NCSY for 9 years in Long Island and 1 in LA. And all of NCSY is based on lying to the participants. So you're going to some kid who is not religiously observant, and you say, I want you to come to a Shabbaton. Says, what's a Shabbaton? Well, you're going to come in on Friday. Once you come in Friday, you will not be allowed to do any. You have to get rid of your phone. You have to get rid of this. You have to get rid of everything like that. You're walking. There's no that. We're going to house you like a mile away from the shore, and you're going to have to walk in the freezing cold, And by the way, you can't take a shower in the morning, And you're going to come to shul Friday night, and we're going to pray, and then we're going to have a speech, and then we're going to have a meal, and then we're going to have a speech, and then we're going to dance, boys with boys, girls with girls, and then we're going to pray, and then we're going to have another speech, and then we're going to have a whole bunch of speeches, and then everyone's going to go home. You're going to come back the next day, and we're going to pray and pray and pray and pray for a very, very long time. And then we're going to eat, and then we're going to sing and dance, boys with boys, girls with girls, and then we're going to have classes, and then we're going to pray, and then we're going to eat, and then we're going to pray, and then we're going to have more speeches. Oh, goody, where do I sign? Instead, we say, hey, you want to come to a Shabbaton? What's a Shabbaton? Oh, it's a weekend for teenagers where everyone gets to socialize. Really? What happens? Oh, we're going to have a band. Yeah, for Saturday night for an hour. Yeah, we're going to have a band. Goes, oh, it sounds really cool. What else? Oh, we're going bowling Saturday night. Now, it would have to be the keen observer to notice I just left out Friday night and Shabbos. I skipped right to Saturday night. But once you get them in there, it's your job to go to sell the event. So, okay. So he says to me, don't tell them they're going to change. Yeah. So I thought to myself, that's the dumbest thing ever. Who in the world is going to fall for that? So I went into the first school and I told them the story. I said, I met a rabbi and he says, whatever you do, don't tell them they're going to change. And I said, that's ridiculous. How could you spend a year learning in yeshiva and not become a different person, become a better Jew, a better son, a potentially better father and husband, a better neighbor, a better businessman, a better lawyer? Whatever you have, learning in yeshiva is going to change you and make you into a better person. And nobody signed up for an interview because you're supposed to lie. So there are yeshivas that actually advertise that. Send us your son and we will not change them. We'll send them back to you, the same turned off Jew that you sent to us. I remember this kid comes back from Israel and he frums out, as sometimes happens, and his father was very upset. He says, this is not how I brought up my son. Look at him. He's becoming a fanatic. And I said to him, don't worry. It's just a phase. He'll grow out of it. Eventually, he won't care about anything just like you. And on more than one occasion, a parent said to me, oh, good. The last thing I want is for my son to come home with a religious fervor that I can't even fake. So if that's what's important to you, I want to go to a yeshiva where I will learn stuff, have a year in Israel, and not be affected at all, okay, then you definitely don't want to go to a really intense Mussar yeshiva. Now, there are certain yeshivas which will be more modern Orthodox and certain yeshivas that will be more Zionistic. By the way, that's not necessarily the same thing. There are some Zionistic yeshivas which are very intense in their religious observance, even though their philosophy is much more Tziyoni, right? And so where there are others that are essentially modern Orthodox and they're going to keep everything pretty calm and you'll come back that way. Now, having said that, it all depends on the staff, obviously, because there are certain schools like this that I know have a secret track record of inspiring kids who then go on to become very serious in their Torah learning. So caveat emptor, buyer beware. So that's the thing is, first of all, you want to know where the school is coming from, what their philosophy is. I told this story earlier because I don't think I've said anything controversial in at least 2 weeks, but I was speaking on behalf of a seminary, and I was speaking in a school, and this girl says, what is your school's hashkafa? I said, what do you mean? She goes, your hashkafa. I said, no, I understand what the word means. I said, I don't know what you mean. And she goes, your hashkafa. I said, well, we believe in God. We believe in Torah. We believe in Shabbos. We believe that, I don't understand what you're asking me. Do you say Halo on Yom Ha'atzmaut or not? I said, that's your entire hashkafa? I said, do you know what the word hashkafa means? Lahashkif means to get up on top of a mountain and look over the entire view. That's your entire hashkafa, whether you say Halo on Yom Ha'atzmaut or not? I said, the girls don't have a minyan, so they don't say Halo on Yom Ha'atzmaut at all, nor do they not say Halo on Yom Ha'atzmaut. Everybody davens by themselves. They don't have a communal davening. So I assume if you want to go to a shul where they say Halo, you can. If you want to go to a shul where they don't say Halo, you can. No one is going to impose any religious observance on you. But that defined the entire hashkaf of the school. So obviously, if you're looking for a place where, there are certain, obviously a Beis Yaakov school, they're going to ignore it completely. And certain Tzioni schools, they will take you to to a shul where they're going to say Hallel, maybe with a bracha, maybe without a bracha, but, celebrate the full thing. And some of them will have a more casual, laissez-faire approach. It'll be a day off, or they'll take a tiyul or something like that, without trying to dictate any religious observance going on to it. So if that's your hashkafa, if it all comes down to what they do in Yom Ha'atzmaut, that's a good thing to be able to ask. You understand? But obviously, if you're looking for a school that's going to be more Tzioni, then you're going to go to a more Tzioni school. If you're looking for one that's not going to be Tzioni, you're going to look for one of those. Okay, that's number one. Number two is the nature of the school. Well, let me explain to you what I mean by that. There are certain yeshivas where you ask them the question, what's your ultimate goal? Meaning, where do you want to see the boys in 3 years? Now, a guy who's learning in the mirror, for example, no one asks them that, because the mirror considers themselves the final destination. The mirror does not look at itself as a stop on the way to another yeshiva or to another program. I would say the same thing is true of Lakewood. Yeah. That if you're learning in Lakewood, they're not like, okay, so after you learn Lakewood for a few years, where's your ultimate goal? Where do you hope to go? Yeah. The idea is that those are the destination. There are certain yeshivas that present themselves as like a mere prep school. They're going to learn here for X number of years, and then they're going to go to the Mir, or then they're going to go back and go to Lakewood. But we're a step along the way. So it's important for you to be honest where you are now and what your capabilities are. You have to be realistic as to what it is you're looking for. So there are certain yeshivas in Israel that cater to Americans coming to learn in Eretz Israel for a year or two. And it's basically a 1-year yeshiva with a shana bet, right? A second-year option. And that's it. That's as far as they take you. And then after that, you have to decide where to go. There are certain yeshivas that are Shana Gimel yeshivas. That means after somebody finished in this one and they're not ready to go to the Mir or Brisk, so they go to a 3rd-year yeshiva, which might have a 3rd and 4th-year program. Yeah. So a person who says, listen, I'm willing to give a year, maybe 2 years to learning, so it doesn't necessarily make sense for you to go to a yeshiva where the people are committed long term. It's better to go to some place where they're going to help you maximize your 1 or 2 year experience to be able to make that as meaningful as possible. Well, it was interesting when I used to have girls who asked me about coming back for a 2nd year. I would tell them it depends. There are some people who definitely should come back. There are some people who definitely should not come back. And there are some people who could come back. I said, a girl who has maximized her experience in the 1st year, what is she coming back in the 2nd year for? What's the purpose? What is she trying to accomplish? Yeah. In other words, is she going to get more out of the 2nd year than she did from the 1st year? Or is it just more of the same? In which case, if she's accomplished whatever it is she wanted to accomplish, why come back for a 2nd year? The flip side of that is a girl who did nothing 1st year and now wants to come back 2nd year to give it another chance. And I say, well, 2nd year should not be 1st year again. So you're coming in and starting in 2nd year without a 1st year. That doesn't make any sense. If you want, repeat 1st year, but it doesn't make any sense to go back for a 2nd year. Unless the 2nd year is just 1st year again, in which case it doesn't serve any purpose. And the other one is people who definitely need it, which means they accomplished a certain amount in Shana Aleph, and they need another year to finish what their goals are. So they're coming back for another year to continue growing building on what they did in the 1st year. And then there are some people who could come back or not come back. I mean, I've had people who came back for second year and they just deteriorated because they maximized their experience and they were ready to move on. By boys' yeshivas, it's a little different because by boys' yeshivas, I'm sorry, I'm getting on my soapbox as I do from time to time and, saying something a little controversial. But the yeshiva system was more or less developed by Reb Chaim Volozhina in the 1700s, early 1800s. And the model has not changed. And it's a mistake because the world has changed. I said this when the day school movement started. The day school movement basically made yeshivas that were like yeshivas. And I said, that's great if you're dealing with the normal Klal Yisrael. But if in fact the job of the yeshiva is now to inspire the students to become from, or to inspire the students to be, meaningful Jews, then learning Gemara 3 starim is not going to do it. It's a mistake. But when Rabbi Salanta started the Musa movement, it's because he saw that the standard yeshiva model was not working. People were not getting Musar, Hashkafa. They weren't growing in their Midos and Yerushalayim, and that's why he started the Musa movement to incorporate that into yeshivas. There were people who fought him terribly because you want the system to stay the way it's always been. And as the Chassam Sofer famously said, Chadash Asam in a Torah, and he was seen as a radical. Rabbi Salanta, he was opposed. The Briskers in particular fought against him, that this whole concept of a Musa movement, Musa yeshiva, was something that had never been seen before, and they didn't really want it. Now it's not a problem because the Musa movement is dead. Yeah. There are certain yeshivas, and I've seen with my own eyes, that when the Mashiach gets up to give a shmooze, half the place piles out of the base medrash. No, they don't want to hear it. Musa Seder, Chavetz Chaim, which is still clinging to the principles of Musa, to the best of my knowledge. Again, I left many, many years ago, but they used to tell a joke. They used to say most yeshivas during Musa Seder, they learn Mishnah Berurah. It says, and Chavetz Chaim, they turn Mishnah Berurah Seder into Musa Seder. I said this over once to a Chavetz Chaim guy, and he said, that's so interesting because I just saw this Musa Haskel in the Mishnah Berurah. So life imitates art. But, so now there's not really that. So if you don't have the Musar, there's Mishnah Berurah Seder in some yeshivas, 15 minutes, 30 minutes. How much halacha are you getting? Tanakh, forget about it. Nobody's learning Musar, so it's Gemara, three starim a day. So the difference between Shana Aleph and Shana Bet is really negligible. It's just more of the same. That's why, a girl will come out of a year of seminary with a foundation, in hashkafa, in halacha, in Tanakh, in, different other areas. And a boy will know the first 8 blot of a Masechta not very well. I know he knows it not very well because I've learned with these guys afterwards, and they pull out their Gemara and it's like they're looking at it for the first time. And they're looking at their little copious notes that they scribbled on the side, and they say, oh, we spent a lot of time on this Taisvis. It says there was a Pnei Yeshua on it. So you spent 8 dapim going be'in, and you don't remember it very well. And then the next Zman you do another Gemara, and then the next Zman another Gemara. And, so the educational model, in my opinion, needs to be rethought to define what are the goals for a Ben Torah today, and what do we need to do to make sure that he accomplishes it. That's what Rabbi Israel Salanta did when he started the Musa movement. He looked at the Bnei Yeshiva and saw the system is broken. It needs to be fixed. And if you don't fix it, you're going to have a problem. But I'm not here to discuss that, because the odds of you finding a yeshiva that does a different tochnit, a different type of a program, it's probably a Baal Tshuva yeshiva or a machon or something like that. Your average yeshiva, you can count on them to do Gemara Be'in first Seder, maybe Bekiyas second Seder, and third Seder will usually be Chazorah of the Ian Seder that you didn't shear and things like that. It might continue with the Bekiyas that you were doing in the afternoon. There might be a half hour of halacha, that's about it. There might be some vadim that are going on that are voluntary, you know what I mean? But for the most part, it's going to be whatever the Masechta is doing. Now there are different yeshivas, And Rabbi Friedman's yeshiva, they do one Masechta until they finish it. So the standard, we do this Masechta for this Zman, and you get the 8 daf, that's it. It's not how it goes, Rav Asher Arieli in the Mir, right? He does a blot, and he does it be'ian. They set quite a pace. Chavetz Chaim is notorious for going very slowly and very be'ian, right? So that's all derech halimud. I'm not even up to that yet. I'm talking now just about what is it that you're looking to accomplish. So if you're planning to give it only a year or 2 years, you're probably doing better to go to a yeshiva that's geared for a year or 2 years. And in fact, those will sometimes have a more varied program. They might have a chumash shir, they might have a tefillah shir, they might have a nach shir, they might, different halal, they might have different things that vary the regular program. That's another approach. It's another approach. As I say, the other yeshivas will just do Gemara 3 starim a day with no bells and whistles. Yeah, and that's what it's going to be. So you have to define, like I say beforehand, what kind of a yeshiva you're looking for. Yeah. So when that comes along, let's categorize it. Right? And I know I'm generalizing here, but there are 2 types of people, those who generalize and those who do not. So let's generalize. There are going to be programs. A program is not even a yeshiva, right? They might call themselves a machon. They might call themselves, Mossad. I don't know. They might have a different name. It's not technically a yeshiva. It is a religious studies program, and it might have other programs along with it. Yeah, and it's not a yeshiva per se. Okay, those are very good if that's your particular goal. I.e., let's say you're looking to go to a place where you're going to learn and also take college courses. So okay, that's going to be a different kind of a institution than one that's just learning Torah, right? Okay. Then there are the 1 or 2 year yeshivas, and those have to be divided up between those that have a more modern Orthodox slant and those that have a more of a yeshivish slant. And, that won't be hard to figure out. You can, talk to the boys who go there. You could talk to the people who are recruiting and get a picture of the student body. Right? So if you look at their brochure and you see a picture of a boy wearing a kippah sruga reading Lonely Man of Faith by Rav Soloveitchik, you get a pretty good idea what message the school is trying to send. If you go in and you see 2 guys with black yarmulkes sitting over a Gemara hovering like this, you have an idea of what they're trying to give over. You understand? If you see the Talmidim all wearing hats and jackets in the brochure and there's someone wearing a frock speaking up front, you understand more or less what message they're trying to send you. So brochures in themselves may not be that informative, but at least it shows you what image the school is trying to project. and to give over. So like I say, those are good options if you're looking for a post-high school, what they sometimes call a gap year. In England, where you have your year before you start university, you have a gap year where you are looking to do something for that time. So that's the schnit that those fit. And within them, there are obviously different levels. Some of them are on a lower level. Some of them are seen as being on a higher intellectual level. But at the end of the day, the goal is a 1 or 2 year program, and then you go back to your country of origin and do whatever. Right? They may have as a goal for you to stay in learning and then to move you into another yeshiva, but that's not what the yeshiva itself is about. Yeah. Okay. It's interesting that there are those that try to mask their appearance, much as I used to do in NCSY when I tried to get people who are not Shabbos Aver to a Shabbaton by stressing different things. So there are certain yeshivas where you can see the Rosh Yeshiva come in and he's got a black hat and paste behind his ears. You know what I mean? And he tells you how, we're very open and we're very this and we're very that. And they try to present themselves as not a Haredi yeshiva. And it could be they even have a student body that is not a Haredi group. But essentially, that's the goal of the yeshiva. And so they're wearing a mask. The problem with those kind of yeshivas is you can see through them in about 2 or 3 years when you see what happens to the Bachrim will come back. And if you see that if the majority of them, they transfer over to the Mir, then you know they're sending one message. And if you see if the majority of them end up, let's say going to YU or to Toro, then they're sending a different message. So you can usually see, sometimes past the marketing. And again, you have to do a little research just to know what the place is. So that's the first level. I should say the first level is like the Mechon. The second level are the 1 or 2 years yeshiva. The third level is what I call the Mir prep schools. These are yeshivas that are not meant specifically for 1 or 2 years. Yes, they get boys who are coming for 1 or 2 years, but the goal is that they can stay in the yeshiva for 3 or 4 or 5 years and eventually move on to the Mir or Lakewood or something like that. And that's a whole set of yeshivas. When you get into that level of yeshiva, then you're basically almost always dealing with yeshivas. It'll be hard pressed to find modern Orthodox yeshivas that go on for 3, 4, 5 years for you to continue learning. Someone might argue that the Jewish Studies program in Bar Ilan is like that. Okay, maybe. But as far as what you think of a yeshiva where a guy can come for 1 or 2 years and then stay on for 3, 4, or 5 years, it's almost always going to be a Haredi yeshiva. That's where you're going to find it. Now, there's another category where you can stay on for a long time, and it's not a Mir prep school, and it's not a Haredi yeshiva, and that are the Hesder yeshivas. Hesder yeshiva was, by the way, started in Kerem B'Yavne, and it was very interesting. He was once there was a dinner, and the prime minister came and said how wonderful Kerem B'Yavne is, that it's a Hesder yeshiva. And Goldwich, the Rosh Yeshiva, got up and he said, in Kvod Rosh HaMemshalah, I have to make a correction. We are not a Hesder yeshiva. We are a regular yeshiva with a Hesder program. Hesder means arrangement. And what does it mean, arrangement? This means that until recently, a boy who was learning yeshiva was entitled to a deferment from the army. Just like in America, a person learning in a religious seminary had a deferment. That's why yeshiva attendance during the Vietnam War increased dramatically Because as bad as yeshiva is, it wasn't considered as bad as the swamps of Vietnam. It wasn't the Ho Chi Minh Trail. So it was close, but not as bad. So they would get a deferment. So Israel always gave you a deferment. Yeah. Now the Supreme Court has canceled that, and Israel's in a little bit of turmoil. And what's going to happen, I'm not sure, but this much is clear: it'll be bad. But that was the arrangement for a long time, and it was called getting a patur, an exemption from army service because you were learning yeshiva. Then there were people who just went into the army. At one point, they started something called the Nachal Haredi, which was supposed to be run with more religious supervision and concern and things like that. There were those who, Rosh Steinman famously was in favor of it. Rosh Sternbach was opposed to it. Rosh Shmuel Auerbach was opposed to it. So it became very controversial. But that was the Nachal Haredi. So what Rav Golduch came up with was what he called Hesder, which means arrangement, where you would learn 6 months in yeshiva and then go to the army for 6 months and learn, go back and forth. So your total service was longer, but this way people could feel like they were going to the army and also being in yeshiva at the same time, and they had their own special units, etc. So, some Hesder yeshivas have an American program. Not all of them, but some of them do. Yeah, a Machal program, which is Machal Chutz La'aretz. Yeah, a Chutz La'aretz program. So there are the straight Israelis who are going to the army, and there are Americans who are learning in the Hesder Yeshiva in a program which is not going to the army and just learning, but it's a Hesder Yeshiva. So yeshivas like Shalavim, Keren B'Yavna, Gush, I'm going to forget some, I'm sure. I think a Kotel. They have a Hesder Yeshiva. So you could go to a Hesder Yeshiva and stay, and go to Shalavim and stay there for 4 or 5 years, of course. And the goal is not for you to graduate and go on to the Mir or Lakewood. Yeah. And the Hashkafa will be much more Tzioni. I don't know if you would call it modern Orthodox, but certainly it won't be Haredi. And that's an option for long-time learning. Yeah. And then there's the Mir and Brisk and Lakewood, which consider themselves the destination. You're not going from there to any place else. Now, some of the Mir prep schools would argue that we're not merely a Mir or Brisk prep school. We are there in and of ourselves. We serve our own purpose. So those are the considerations when you're going to choose a yeshiva. Where am I holding on this? Hashkafically and structurally of the yeshiva, and therefore, as the Chazal say, Ezu Chacham Arayas Anoilad, who's smart, someone who can see the future. And so the future is, look at this and say, where do I see myself in 5 years, in 10 years, and choose the yeshiva that's going to help me to accomplish that. Okay, next time we'll talk about Derech Limud and what the yeshiva does and what we're trying to accomplish. We'll talk about that more next time. And that brings us to the question and answer portion of our program. We don't have a sponsor this week, but remember that you can sponsor simply if you want the question and answer portion, as opposed to sponsoring an entire episode. By Anonymous, in Parshas Balak, Klal Yisrael is blessed with Ma Tovo Alecha Yaakov. Is there a way we can try to maintain that? All right, so let's develop this a little bit, right? Ma Tovo Alecha Yaakov, Mishkan Asecha Yisrael, is essentially saying that every Jewish home is a Mishkan. And that's why the first completely Jewish home, which was the first completely Jewish kid to get married, which was Yitzchak, it says when he took his wife into the tent, all of the nisim of the Mishkan took place. The cloud hovered over, The bread stayed warm like the lechem upon him all week. The candles burnt the entire time like the Ner Ma'aravi and the menorah. So their home was actually a Mishkan. How do we achieve this? And it's tricky. I'm going to tell you up front, it's tricky. The first thing is you have to be clear that this is a goal. There are a lot of people who will pay lip service to this, but they don't really mean it. They don't think that their home is a Makom Kadosh, nor do they necessarily want their home to be a Makom Kadosh. I'll give you an easy example, and you'll be able to tell how old this question is by the technological terms that I'm referring to. This girl said, I went out with a boy, and he says he wants to go to movies. And I said, I don't want to go to a movie theater. I don't think that's proper. If we want to watch a movie, we'll rent a VCR and rent a tape from Blockbuster and watch a movie. This is what she says to me. And I said, if you think it's wrong to go to a movie theater, why would you bring it into your home? Your home should have a certain level of Kedusha above the street. I would much rather that the two of you go out to a movie theater to watch a movie than to bring the movie into your home. Because your home should be a Makam Kadosh. Rabbi Orlofsky said to me, he heard from an Adam Gadol, and he didn't tell me who, but he says, I heard from an Adam Gadol that you should always speak a different language in the house than they speak on the street, so your family knows that your home is not the street. And this is the difference between a Rishus HaYochid and a Rishus HaRabim. Rishus HaRabim is the street. The Rishus HaYochid is not the street. And that's why on Shabbos, the Rishus HaRabim only goes up 10 Tvachim, but a Rishus HaYochid goes ad l'Rakia, all the way up to heaven. The Kedusha goes up. And that's the significance of a mezuzah, that you should know when you pass this threshold, you are coming into a home that is a holy place. So he says, you always speak a different language. And he says, when I lived in America, I only spoke Yiddish in the house to the children. When we moved to Eretz Yisrael, I spoke English. So that's when I decided to move to Israel, because I can only speak English. And so I could speak to my kids in Hebrew, but then they'll end up in special education. So in my house, we only speak English because that's the only language I know. But the idea is that when people come in, they know that it's different. Geisler told me that his mother told him about his grandfather, who was a chassid of the Chidush Arim. The Chidush Arim, carried himself with Malchus, and they're chassidim. I hope I have the story right. I don't think Rabbi Geisler actually watches the podcast, although we had him on as a guest, but this is the story he tells me. He says he never walked into the house, ever. He knocked on the door and waited for somebody to answer it. And if he had to stand there a long time, he stood outside, but you don't just walk into a house. You understand the level of sensitivity you have to have? He says, it was one Yontif, who says he must have been schmoozing after davening, and my mother had, a bunch of guests for the Suda, and she says to me, "Oy, he making us wait. He's really going to get it when he comes home." And she says, I was very excited because I never heard my mother and father fight ever. Anyway, so he finally comes home, knocks on the door. She answers the door. He goes, "Good Yontiv." She says, "Good Yontiv." Says to the guests, and "I'm sorry I was late. Somebody was asking me a question, etc. "Oh, good, come, we'll make Kiddush, Afterwards, they go into the kitchen, and she says, my mother says to my grandmother, goes, "I thought you were going to give it to him." He goes, "You didn't see?" Oh boy, he knew I was upset with him. I said, "What do you mean?" Because usually I smile like this, and now I only smiled like this. So he knew I was upset. You know, when you have a house and you ask yourself what comes in and what doesn't come in, right? So there was a time when the big fight was about a television. Do you let a television in your house? Do you not let a television in your house? You know, all these kind of fights. They would have certain schools that would ask on the application, do you have a TV in your house? And so before they would go to the interview, they would take the TV outside, put it on the porch and say, no, we don't have a TV in our house. You know, it became very, emotional. Going back to the time when they had big consoles, Victor Miller famously said, he goes, should I have a television in my house? He says, absolutely. You just have to break that little glass thing and then you have plenty of room to put in a shas. So why did schools have this? Because you could tell the difference between a kid who watches TV and a kid who doesn't watch TV. We had been living in Israel for a number of years. And of course, we didn't have a television. And we went to stay with relatives in the States. And my kids, they had a TV, and my kids were just glued to it. This is a genetic thing. I know, because my parents worked, and so I was raised by a television. They would just sit me in front of the TV, and I would just sit there like this and watch the TV all day, And when other children my age in other situations were memorizing Mishnayos Baal Peh, I can tell you the theme song to any television show from the 60s and 70s or early 70s. Yeah. So that's how I grew up. I could tell you all of the commercials. Yeah. I sometimes incorporate them into shiurim because, like I say, they're lodged in my brain forever and I can't get them out, It's so funny. Dave Barry, when he was talking about, I don't remember, he has two books. Dave Barry turns 40, Dave Barry turns 50, and he's talking about aging. And in one of them, he says, people think as you get older, your memory starts to go, but it's not true. He says, you just have too much stuff in your brain that you can't get rid of. He says, so when it comes to something like remembering, I don't know, all your children's names, that might be a little hard for you. He says, but I bet you can sing the theme song to the Beverly Hillbillies with no problem. Come on. Oh, listen to my story about a man named Jane. There's no question about it. Anyway, so we're there just for a month in the summer. And at some point, I went to the supermarket to do some shopping, and one of my kids said, look, tricks, part of a balanced breakfast. Now, nobody believes that tricks is part of a balanced breakfast. You'd have to put in a lot of health food for tricks to balance it out. In fact, there was a story I heard years ago. I don't know if it's true, but like I always say, I'm not Pesach Crone, where they gave this rat a box of Fruit Loops and he ate the box instead of the Fruit Loops because he sensed there was more nutritional value in it. But television changes the nature of how people talk. When I was in high school, I noticed there were certain people who could only talk about three things: what they watched on TV, what they were going to watch on TV, and repeating entire conversations and lines from what they saw on TV. And this is it. Their entire identity was just defined by watching TV. Oh, those are the good old days. Now, with the internet, you watch people on their phone all the time. They're watching videos. They're watching this. They're watching, listening, going and going and going and going. And there's no let up. When you come into a house, you can see people sitting at the table, assuming that there's still a dinner table, and everyone's on their phone. Netflix had done a documentary about this, about how social media is designed to become addictive. And they showed this family where the mother was trying to get control. And so she got this like glass lockbox. It says, everyone's putting your device in the lockbox for the duration of the meal so we can have a regular meal. Anyway, it lasts a while, and then the girl goes over and she just breaks the box and takes her phone back. She just can't handle it. So what do you want in your house? What do you want? What do you put up in your house? Pictures of Gedolei Torah. What you're putting up there is very important. I was deeply moved one time because I was speaking someplace and a guy comes over with his son and he says, "Can we take a picture?" And I was like, "Sure." And he takes it and he says, "My son has a display in his room with all of the Gedolei Torah that he's met." So I didn't feel so bad because it was like me and Pesach Kron and Chanukah Telah. So I felt a little better. At least I was in a comfortable room. If it was like with Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, and me, I would have gotten a little nervous. I've got this picture with me and Rosh Steinberg. We were both sitting on a dais, and I don't know who looked more uncomfortable. But what do you put up? I was talking with this fellow once who was nominally observant, more towards the not observant than to observant. And he was worried about his daughter intermarrying and what can I do? She was in public school and how can I make sure that she only dates Jewish boys? And we're talking. And at some point he says to me, "Oh, by the way, Rabbi, my grandfather passed away. He was a religious man and he left all these boxes of Jewish books that I can't really read. And if you want, you could take them." So I said, "You just answered your own question." I said, "Look around your living room. You've got display cases, with collectibles and artwork, and, all these fancy kind of things." He says, "Get rid of those. Put your grandfather's Sfarim up there. So your children get to see what's important to you." I took the collectibles because I already have Sfarim. But what do you want? What message are you sending your kid? You can walk into certain homes and you see that the artwork is Jewish artwork, even if the people may not be that from. But what you see in the house reflects what it is that you're trying to bring across. Therefore, you have to know your house is not the street, and don't treat it like the street. You have to maintain a certain standard in your house, and what you do outside, you do outside. But the house itself has to be a certain standard. There are certain hashgachas that some people eat and some people don't eat. And I don't let them in my house. Because I want everyone to know that in my house, anybody can come in and eat with confidence, with nothing to worry about. The house will try to be on the highest standard. And that's always the important thing. My brother Gedalia and my sister-in-law Miriam, who live in Muncie, they were building a house in Forshey. And they built a very large dining room. And it had a speaker system, etc. And he told me once, he says, "I'm embarrassed by having such a large house." And I figured, why would Hashem give it to me except to do chesed? And he signed up for people who can't afford a hall. That if they don't have a very large event, Sheva Brachos or, a Vort or whatever it is, he would give their house to them to be able to make the event. And this way they could play the music over the speakers and the people could speak, a microphone and they made their kitchen available. Sometimes they made the food and served it themselves, to be able to provide it. When people grow up and see that your home is a place of haknosas orchim, of chesed, of things like that, it sends a message that this home is not just a regular house, it is a mishkan. And that's it for this episode. If you want to find out more about the show, you can go to my website, RabbiOrlofsky.com. You can leave a comment. You can write an email. You can sign up for one of our online shiurim. I've mentioned this now a couple of times, and I have gotten some email response that there might be people who are interested in starting a Pirkei Avos shir. So we'll have to see if more people express interest on that. We'll have to add a little button to sign up for that if somebody's interested. In the meantime, we still have our Tefillah shir, Mesilas Yesharim for women, Daf Yomi for men, and we may add, like I say, another shir. So that's it. You can have other online content. You can sponsor an episode. You can sponsor a question and answer. You can sponsor a Parsha in 5. And that's it for this episode. I am Rabbi Orlofsky, and this has been the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.
It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Knowledge and wisdom will help you grow. Lots of fun in every episode, and we don't have to rhyme. No, we don't. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show on RabbiOrlofsky.com. Torah anytime, YouTube and more. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Till next time, till we meet again, it's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.